There's a grand total of 67 enchantments added by the Fargo Souls mod, with each of them providing powerful effects based on an armour set. Today, I want to collect every single one of these, but simply crafting them as part of a normal playthrough would be a little too easy, even in Eternity mode. So instead, I'll be using these in place of every other accessory, meaning no boots, no shields, no emblems, charms or necklaces, and most importantly, no wings. Will these enchantments be powerful enough to carry me all the way to the soul of Terraria, or will Fargo's increased difficulty prove too challenging for enchantments alone? Unsurprisingly, I start the playthrough without a single enchantment, and my first major goal is to gather up any 5 of them as quickly as possible to get a full loadout. Before that though, I turn on Eternity mode and collect my free gifts from the Deviant, which should help speed up the early game. Among these are the Puff in a Bottle and the Eurus socks, but these aren't quite hexagonal enough for my liking, so I'm stuck with my base movement. Despite being mere seconds into the playthrough, this already touches upon one of the biggest issues I'll have throughout it: mobility. Without access to all the boots, balloons and wings I'd usually rely on, my movement is quite limited. I do have the option to use grappling hooks and mounts, which would be more than enough in vanilla, but this is Eternity mode we're talking about, where mobility is perhaps second only to skill in determining whether or not you'll win a fight. Thankfully, there are a few enchantments which should help with this a little later in the playthrough, but for now, I'll take what I can get. As it turns out, what I can get isn't much, with my first accessory being the wood enchantment. This makes bestiary and banner entries complete twice as fast, and gives a shop discount based on bestiary completion. It's a small buff and thankfully the discount works from the inventory, but in all honesty I was more excited by the idea of a good modifier than the enchantment itself, which sadly it didn't come with. Even more sad is the fact that this was clearly the easiest enchantment to get, so I end up spending much of the early game completing side quests to collect the various items needed for the rest. Many of these are at least a little luck based, such as the plum needed for the boreal wood enchantment. You could end up getting this from the first boreal tree you shake, or, like me, you could make tree shaking a vital part of your early game routine. This can only be done once a day though, so I spend the rest of my time exploring the world, farming herbs for potions, and not understanding how to buy paintings from the painter. Thankfully, there's another option that doesn't require exotic fruits or black market paintings. In fact, all you really need to make the pumpkin enchantment is a whole lot of pumpkins, along with some Molotov cocktails and a sickle. And for such an easy to craft enchantment, it quickly became one of my favourites. When equipped, the player will create pumpkins on the ground while moving. Once fully grown, these can be touched by the player or enemies to spread damaging embers that linger on the ground. If touched by a player, it will also heal them by 25 health, making it an exceptional option for both damage and survivability. In fact, if you collect every single pumpkin yourself, you'll gain up to 200 health per minute, the equivalent of drinking a super healing potion. After further increasing my survivability with a stack of 30 regen potions, I finally figure out that the painter has a separate shop dedicated to paintings, and buy the final item I need to craft the Shadewood enchantment. This surrounds the player with an aura, and anything struck within it will spew out blood that damages other enemies, helping me survive a little longer in the caverns while I increase my health and gather more ores for future enchantments, before returning to the snow biome to once again shake trees. It seems that luck is against me until I talk to the lumberjack, who appears to have gone out earlier that morning to collect all the plums himself. It's then another short trip to my nearest crimson altar to craft the boreal wood enchantment, which allows me to shoot out 3 snowballs every second while attacking for a slight boost to my damage. By following the crimson caves down, I stumble upon enough emeralds to craft a hook, my first real movement option. It may not sound like much, but it's a huge improvement to my overall mobility, and the best I'll get for quite some time. A 30 stack of pumpkin pie should speed me up a little more, along with some iron skin potions that more than double my defense. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of unlimited potion buffs, but when it's a part of the core mod I'm playing, I'm not exactly going to nerf myself on purpose. I don't need to be nerfed any more than I already am, as I soon find out when a natural Eye of Cthulhu spawns. Maybe with a full arena and perfect movement, my emerald hook would have been enough to beat this boss. But if you're looking for perfect movement, then you're watching the wrong channel. Go watch Ardus or something. On this channel, we rely much more on gear than skill, and thanks to Fargo's letting you swap evil materials at a crimson altar, I can now complete my first full loadout with the Ebonwood enchantment, which inflicts a pretty powerful debuff that increases the damage enemies take by 5 and reduces their contact damage by 20%. The only issue is that to receive this debuff, they have to stay inside a pretty small aura for a full 3 seconds, and with the speed that Eye of Cthulhu is moving at, good luck keeping it still for that long. As it turns out, crafting the first 5 enchantments you can isn't a great foundation for a functional loadout. So if I have any hope against the upcoming bosses, then I need to knuckle down and get grinding. With the early game grind out of the way, it's time to make some new enchantments. But first, here's one I made earlier. The Iron enchantment increases pickup range and gives materials a one-time chance to not be consumed when crafting. This works from the inventory, and when combined with the shimmer I found, should make crafting the rest of the enchantments a lot easier. Speaking of, I'm now ready to make quite a few of them. The Gladiator enchantment allows me to place down a banner that gives knockback immunity along with some increased damage and damage reduction while in its range. An excellent option for fights in smaller arenas. It also makes spears fall from the sky when I attack that increase in both damage and frequency when in the banner's radius. The Lead enchantment reduces debuff damage by 40% and makes my attacks inflict lead poisoning, which spreads among enemies and deals damage over time, perfect for bosses with many segments like the Eater of Worlds. The Rich Mahogany enchantment drastically improves the use of grappling hooks, along with granting a Thorns effect and 10% damage reduction for one hit while hooked. For now, it's my only mobility enchantment, and therefore my most important. The Copper enchantment makes my critical strikes occasionally shoot chain lightning at nearby enemies, which also happens when hitting enemies with the Wet debuff, resulting in some lovely synergy with another enchantment further down the line. The Silver enchantment is a highly skill-based accessory that allows you to parry attacks, negating the damage if timed correctly and buffing your next melee strike. Sadly though, I'm not a skill-based player, so it doesn't see much use. The Fossil enchantment will revive the player upon dying with a 5-minute cooldown, along with spawning bones when hit that can be picked up to heal for 20 health. Pretty decent for survivability, but I prefer the pumpkin one. These accessories are all well and good as damage or survivability boosts, but aside from the Rich Mahogany enchantment, there's not a single one that improves my mobility. Thankfully though, all that is about to change with my next accessory combination. The Ancient Cobalt enchantment lets me perform an explosive jump that damages enemies, inflicts the Oiled debuff, and grants 15 frames of invulnerability. It takes a while to get used to the instant vertical acceleration, but once you are, you'll find it hard to go back to life without it. Many attacks can be completely evaded with the explosion's iframes, and the damage output is surprisingly good. Genuinely one of my favourite accessories in not just Fargo's, but the entirety of modded Terraria. On its own, this would already be a massive boost to my mobility, but when combined with the Jungle enchantment, things get taken to a whole other level. Not only does it give a short distance dash to make changing directions much easier, but it also provides a double jump that releases 3 clouds of damaging spores, giving me some mid-air manoeuvrability for the first time in the playthrough. With potentially the best enchantment combo in pre-hard mode, I was more than ready to take on the first few bosses, starting with the Trojan Squirrel. This boss never stood a chance, with my high damage output ending the fight so quickly that I even managed to accidentally no-hit. It's at this point that I realise the Trojan Squirrel gives me 5 herb bags when defeated, so I repeatedly fight it and use the herb bags it drops to make some new potions for fighting the King Slime. While it was a bit harder than the Trojan Squirrel, King Slime still falls on my first attempt, and after farming him a few times to get a full set of ninja armour, I craft it into the ninja enchantment, which gives projectiles up to 20% additional crit chance depending on how fast they're moving, and increases projectile speeds when the player is moving slowly. At this point you might have noticed that I'm wearing a full set of meteor armour and be wondering how I managed to get that before a meteor has even landed. As many of you know, it's possible to find meteor bars in gold chests right above the underworld, but usually not enough to make a full set of armour. What many of you won't know is that as long as you find at least 25 meteor bars, you actually have an infinite supply. You see, by shimmering the bars into meteorite and placing it on the surface, I can create an artificial biome where meteor heads will spawn. These have a 2% chance of dropping a single meteorite ore in pre-hard mode. But don't get too excited, as to get the full set of meteor armour this way, you'd have to grind through an average of 6,750 meteor heads. Thankfully, Fargo's comes to the rescue and allows me to turn meteor head banners into 25 ore at a solidifier, making it easy to craft not just the armour, but also the star cannon required to make the meteor enchantment. At which point, the game tells me to cool it with the tier skipping by not letting me craft it before taking down an evil boss. At least I can use the space gun for free with meteor armour. Oh, they thought of that too. And before you even mention the star cannon, you should know that in Eternity mode it deals 40% less damage than usual, making the idea of farming the ammo for it rather painful. Looks like there's nothing else for it then. I'm actually going to have to follow the intended progression of the game. With the eye down, I went straight into challenging a new boss added by Fargo's, the Cursed Coffin. This was my first time fighting this boss and I have to say, it's really well made. All of the attacks feel well telegraphed and dodgeable thanks to my ancient cobalt and jungle enchantments, and the design is absolutely brilliant, so much so that I fought it a second time just for fun. It's time for fun to take a back seat though, as with the Oasis crates it dropped, I can craft the Scarab Rod to finally get started fishing. The reason I've been putting this off for so long is that unlike a normal playthrough, I won't be able to slowly improve my fishing ability with the help of the angler's accessories, as these are more enhancements rather than enchantments, making this a long, long grind. Partway through fishing, I take a break to craft some more enchantments. These have been available from the start, but require some rarer items that I hadn't found until now. First is the Palmwood enchantment, quickly followed by the gold one. The former allows me to place down a palm tree sentry that fires coconuts at nearby enemies, while the latter causes my attacks to inflict Midas, and allows me to enter a golden shell every 55 seconds to negate damage for 5. It also makes money go straight into my piggy bank, which works from the inventory so I keep a hold of it. Next up is the Platinum enchantment, a very useful mob farming tool that gives enemies a 20% chance to roll their loot table 5 times. Last for now is the Cactus enchantment, which releases a spread of needles when attacking and makes enemies explode into needles on death. A pretty decent damage boost at the cost of short range. After even more time spent fishing, I use the palm tree sentry to help out against the goblin army. Once they're defeated, I go out in search of the Tinkerer and buy his workshop, which I'll need later to craft some more enchantments. First though, I capitalise on the fact that Eternity mode is entirely dependent on an unbalanced quality of life mod by purchasing as many golden slime summons as I can from the Deviant, killing them all for profit, then reinvesting the returns into even more golden slime summons a second and eventually third time, giving me the 124 platinum I need to get some good reforges. On an unrelated side note, do you guys ever get the feeling that some older players went through the game with quality of life mods enabled, providing stable and highly effective ways to farm gold, increased spawn rates, and all the materials needed to build affordable housing for each NPC? Then, once they filled up their piggy banks, claimed all the land, and got the best endgame gear, they ran a server-wide vote and collectively decided to remove the quality of life mods, claimed they farmed all those items legitimately through hard work and dedication, and also reverted back to using the fandom wiki because it felt more traditional and nostalgic. All the while, you just spawned with a broken copper short sword into late hard mode where it's nighttime, the pillars are active, and all the life crystals are being hoarded by one guy on the server who claims that even though there's none left in the world, you can still get them by fishing. He also happens to own all the fishing rods, but is happy to rent one out to you for the low price of 5 platinum per day. Plus taxes, of course. Let me know in the comments if you ever get that feeling. With my items reforged, I once again return to the fishing grind. This time using my golden bug net to catch underworld bait so I can fish in lava for the final component I need to make fishing bearable. With the lava-proof hook, I can condense all my fishing accessories into the lava tackle bag, which then gets combined with some angler armour and a couple fishing rods to make the angler enchantment. This, unsurprisingly, massively buffs fishing, granting all the effects of its components along with making catches almost instantaneous. At the same time I craft the ashwood enchantment, which reduces lava damage, makes fire debuffs deal 0 damage, and will complement the player's attacks with fireballs when they're inflicted with almost any debuff. Shortly after this I add the tungsten enchantment to my armoury, increasing my melee weapon size by 50% and whip range by 20, along with making my attacks cause a shockwave every 2.5 seconds that damages everything in its range. I craft the blade of grass to test out the increased melee size, and I couldn't have asked for better weather to do so. While it's raining, I'm able to take down raincoat zombies to get the rain hat and raincoat needed for the, you guessed it, rain enchantment. This spawns an umbrella above the player's head that grants featherfall and blocks up to 200 damage before going on cooldown. It also makes you immune to the lightning strikes that happen in Eternity mode. But the most important buff from this enchantment is also its most inconspicuous. It makes all of your attacks inflict wet. Those of you that have been paying attention will know exactly where I'm going with this, but I'll get to that shortly. For now, I'm just finishing up fishing up the final 2 fish needed to craft the snow enchantment. When equipped and not attacking, up to 5 snowballs will appear around the player. Once you attack, these will be launched at the cursor, dealing 30 magic damage each. It also makes attacks inflict frostburn for 2 seconds, but in all honesty, it's pretty outclassed by this stage. Speaking of, the final enchantment I can get at this stage is the minor one, and thankfully it doesn't take long to get the night vision helmet I need from the granite caves in order to make it. Now all that's left to do is murder the merchant a couple times to get the final piece of mining armour, then I head to the Crimson to craft it. The mining enchantment gives you everything you need to destroy your world and harvest its natural resources, granting 50% mining speed, immunity to mining explosives, and pretty much every exploration focused potion buff you can think of. It'll remain incredibly useful for the rest of the playthrough, but for now, let's move on to the next boss, and more importantly, let's get back to the rain enchantment. As I was saying, wet is a pretty pointless debuff on its own, but you may recall a little earlier I mentioned the copper enchantment has some lovely synergy with another. Well, it's this one. With all of my attacks inflicting wet, the copper enchantment is able to trigger its chain lightning regardless of whether I land a critical strike, which quickly tears through the creepers in the brain's first phase. The second phase is a lot more difficult thanks to it periodically inflicting the confused debuff. But after a close battle and with one final swing of the blade of grass, the brain of Cthulhu falls. This unlocks a lot of new armours and therefore a lot of new enchantments, and making them is going to be much easier thanks to the craftable Crimson Altar from Magic Storage, removing the need to venture into the Crimson each time I want to craft one. First up on the list is the Meteor enchantment. This is one of the most important accessories in this entire playthrough, and the crafting recipe should tell you exactly why. It essentially acts as a magiluminescence with some extra damage thrown on top in the shape of a meteor that falls on enemies, with the cooldown between meteors decreasing faster the more the player moves. This will be my replacement for boots for most of the playthrough. And on the topic of replacing, I also make some Crimson armour as it's a more general set than the meteor one I've been using. I then get straight to gathering up some ores with the help of my mining enchantment. With my freshly mined obsidian, I craft a full set of armour which then turns into the obsidian enchantment. This acts as a direct upgrade to the ashwood enchantment, granting all of its effects along with free movement in lava, complete immunity to lava damage, and grants the lava wet debuff while submerged in lava or for 10 seconds after leaving lava. This buff makes the player's attacks spawn damaging explosions with a short cooldown. On its own, it's a pretty decent option, but it also has some great synergy with my next craft, the Molten Enchantment. This surrounds the player in a ring of fire that ignites both enemies and the player, which is an easy way to proc the fireball attack that the Obsidian enchantment inherits from the Ashwood one. Enemies within the ring of fire also take 20% extra damage, making it an excellent option for close quarters combat. Within this little batch I also make the Tin Enchantment. This sets the player's crit chance to 5% and increases it by 5% each time they crit, up to a total of 15% or 2 times the player's crit chance, whichever one is higher. The bonus reverts back to 5% when the player takes damage, so it's a high risk, high reward enchantment for all you no-hitters out there. That's definitely not me though, as I soon find out while fighting the Eater of Worlds. My damage may have been incredibly high, with it even reaching around 800 DPS when hitting multiple segments, but my health also got incredibly low, dropping down to just above 2 hearts near the end of the fight. Thankfully I managed to pull through and survive the encounter, claiming the Demonite and Shadow Scales I can use to craft my next accessory. The Shadow enchantment causes 2 orbs to orbit the player. When hit by a player's projectile, these will release a burst of homing shadow energy at nearby enemies. I don't end up using it, but I do make use of the Shadow Armour itself for a boost to my movement speed. This also frees up my Crimson Armour to make the Crimson enchantment, a very attractive survivability option that heals 50% of a hit's damage if you manage to not get hit for the next 7 seconds. I don't quite trust myself to not get hit, even for as low as 7 seconds, so I keep this one in my storage and head on to the next boss. While using a really big bomb from Fargo's to clear space for this, I end up spawning it a little earlier than expected, so have to do some quick improvisation with my arena. This cost my health dearly, but thanks to a healing potion I'm back in the fight. The Demon Scythe is quite hard to aim during certain sections, but regardless I manage to slowly whittle down the Queen Bee's health while she tries her absolute best and by all measures succeeds in whittling down my own. Then, with me being just 1 hit away from death, I am saved by the real MVPs of this run. Not the imps, my enchantments, with my Ancient Cobalt Explosion dealing a 194 damage crit, followed by my Meteor enchantment dealing a 241 damage crit, Queen Bee falls. I add some placeable buffs to my arena then spawn her again, as I'll need more of her drops for my next accessory. This fight feels like it was made for the Ancient Cobalt enchantment, with her horizontal dashes being very easy to dodge with it, and its explosion damage takes out the royal subjects in a matter of seconds. I really would suggest trying it if you're struggling against this boss. It's far easier and more consistent than bonking her with the Shield of Cthulhu. With the Queen Bee defeated for a second time, I return home to open my treasure bags, granting me everything I need to make the bee enchantment other than a single honeyfin. So I head back to the jungle to get one of these, and decide to stock up on them as a replacement for healing potions, since they're 20% more effective than them. With that, I'm now ready to craft potentially the most important accessory in this entire playthrough, the bee enchantment. This gives the effects of the Hive Pack, allows flight on par with fledgling wings, and creates flowers when flying that grow over time. Touching fully grown flowers will give the player the honey buff and release a swarm of damaging bees. This thing really has it all. Movement, damage, survivability, and it's going to remain useful a lot longer than you'd expect thanks to another enchantment I'll get to later. That's the story for hard mode though, which will be coming sooner than you think as there's only one more enchantment I can get before the Wall of Flesh. To get it, I'll first have to take down Skeletron, so I travel to the dungeon and curse the old man. I'm not actually intending to win this fight, but summoning him will give me a suspicious skull which I can then use to summon him back home at my full arena. The first proper fight is quite messy. There's a lot more projectiles to dodge than your average Skeletron fight, and halfway through his hands magically grow back, increasing his defense and giving you even more to dodge. This is definitely a skill issue rather than a mobility one though. I have the Meteor enchantment buffing my movement speed and acceleration, the Bee enchantment granting flight, and the Ancient Cobalt enchantment for my explosive jump, making it so I avoid that awkward slow acceleration you'd usually get when you start flying from the ground. My last 2 slots are a little less important, but I'm currently using the Molten and Obsidian enchantments for the fireball synergy they have. Despite my high mobility, I still die to the skull, so decide to try swapping out movement for damage by equipping the Shadow enchantment over the Meteor one. This doesn't work either, so I go back to my original loadout just to see his health fall to only 4 HP a few seconds after I die. Attempt 4 is much the same, and attempt 5 is looking even worse, with my health getting down to single digits with a third of the fight remaining. I somehow manage to claw it back though and eventually take down Skeletron for good, unlocking the dungeon and the final enchantment of pre-hard mode. As you could probably guess, this one's going to be based on Necro Armour. so I spend some time in the dungeon farming bones from the skeletons and looting chests with any golden keys I find. The last item I need to collect is the bone wand, and while searching for this I stumble upon the tavern keep sleeping in the dungeon. I'm actually quite glad I found him, as having a few sentries for extra damage certainly won't harm. But before I get to that, I finish up my dungeon raid with a Darkcaster banner, which I convert into a bone wand and use to craft the Necro enchantment. Enemies slain while wearing this will drop bone piles on the ground, and touching these bone piles will spawn a mini dungeon guardian that quickly homes in on nearby enemies, dealing a third of the killed enemy's max health as damage. On bosses, bone piles will instead drop every 10% of their health, and will deal 4% of their health as damage, meaning it can take out up to 36% of a boss's health if you manage to collect every single bone pile. This is obviously incredibly powerful against the right boss, but before we get to any of those, I first need to double back on myself and deal with the Old One's army. I start this little side project by repeatedly fighting the Queen Bee in the hopes of getting a sentry called the Hive Staff to drop, which should hopefully help against the event. After 9 kills and still no drop, I gave up and fought the Old One's army without it anyway. I later discovered that this was actually moved from a boss drop to a shimmer recipe. I figure you guys would let this slide though, as it's not like I have a previous history of forgetting about shimmer recipes.
You know, you can shimmer cactus into pumpkins.
Don't tell this guy that you can get pumpkin shimmering cactus.
2851. Is shimmering cactus into pumpkin not a feature in Calamity?
Can't you just shimmer cactus to get pumpkins?
I am watching this and wondering why he didn't just shimmer cactus for pumpkins.
You can shimmer cactus to get pumpkin.
Just shimmer cactus for
Could have shimmered
pumpkins?
cactuses for pumpkins, but fishing is
You
cooler.
could just shimmer cacti.
You can just shimmer cactus into pumpkins.
Around 28 or so minutes, I have a small and pretty worthless tip. You can shimmer cacti to get pumpkins.
You can get pumpkins by shimmering cactus.
Hey, for future reference, you can actually shimmer cactus to make pumpkin. Bit easier than fishing up fishes and decapitating them in the hope of finding some pumpkin in them.
You can shimmer cactus into pumpkin. Why people doesn't know about this?
If you don't know already after this video, you can shimmer cactus to get pumpkin.
2848, just shimmer cactus, bruh.
Good video. One thing, you could transform the cactus in pumpkin using the shimmer.
You can shimmer cactus into pumpkins.
Can't cactus shimmer into pumpkins? I get it.
Compared to the Eternity Mode bosses I've become accustomed to, the Old One's army was super easy, barely an inconvenience, so I farmed it 4 more times to stockpile the Defender medals I'd need in hard mode. At this point there's only 2 bosses left standing between me and the Wall of Flesh, the first one being everyone's favourite and the most memorable boss in Terraria, Deerclops. This didn't go very well. In fact, it doesn't go very well 3 times in a row, so I decide to give the other boss a try instead, the Deviant, who promptly backs me into a corner and bullies me for my lack of skill. Looks like I'm going to have to stick at it with Deerclops then. With each attempt I slowly got better at the boss's patterns, but the big change came when I rather counterintuitively decided to fight it outside of my arena. You see, Eternity Mode Deerclops makes the player phase through any platforms, but is perfectly happy to spawn attacks on those platforms, which makes it really hard to dodge them. Turns out this is the exact change I needed, as after 2 attempts out in the open, I managed to defeat Deerclops. The only real upgrade this boss offers is the Deer Sinew, a consumable power-up that grants the player a dash without needing to sacrifice an accessory slot. While that may sound like a no-brainer, it also comes with some major downsides. First of all, it can cause the player to briefly get the frozen debuff when hit, and secondly, it reduces the player's damage output based on how fast they're moving, maxing out at a 15% reduction. On balance, it's probably not worth consuming due to the pretty significant drawbacks, so I consume it anyway and proceed to die to the Deviant another couple of times. It's only after this and another 10 fights against Queen Bee that I realised I could shimmer the small sting into the Hive Staff, a sentry added by Fargo's that periodically releases bees to swarm enemies. Since the bees have homing, this has a much higher chance of hitting enemies than my Flameburst staff, and it gets further improved by my bee enchantment, so it just makes sense to use it. After another 2 deaths against the Deviant, I decide to actually give the small sting a try, and I'm really glad I did as it seems this is exactly the power boost I needed. Either that or the increased movement speed from the shadow armour made it much easier to dodge attacks. Either way, the Deviant eventually falls and drops the 15 deviating energy I need to craft a full set of new armour. Nakomi is the first set of modded armour you'll find in a Fargo's playthrough, and it's pretty much the best one available in pre-hard mode outside of some niche min-maxing scenarios. So while I fight the Deviant again in the background, why don't I go over exactly how powerful this set is? The hood alone grants 6 defense, 7% damage, and an additional 2 minion slots, making it far and away the best summoner headpiece currently available. The hoodie, yes, the chestplate is called a hoodie, gives 10 defense, 1 HP per second life regen, and 5% damage reduction, which also makes it the best defensive chest piece currently available. The leggings provide 6 defense, 7% crit chance, and 10% movement speed. While the stat boosts on these are a little more subdued than the other two pieces, it's well worth making due to the set bonus, which provides an additional 7% damage and crit chance to your current weapon class and allows you to charge energy by grazing attacks. This energy will convert into a rapid healing buff if you get hit, or can be released as life-draining hearts by double tapping down. If you manage to fully charge your energy, you will instead be able to perform a powerful attack with the Deviant's axe. I kinda forgot about the set bonus while playing, but even still the stat boosts alone are more than enough to make the Deviant a much easier fight, giving me the additional deviating energy I need to make the ultimate pre-hard mode minion, the Children of Nature's Eulogy. This summons up to 5 minions that each have a different attack, and luckily 5 is the exact number of minion slots I have, with my default one, 2 from the Nakomi Hood, and another 2 from the Summoner Potion and Bewitching Table. It's hands down the best summon in pre-hard mode, and along with some magic weapons it tears through the wall of flesh. I did make a pretty major mistake using the Necro enchantment during this fight, as the bone piles are always going to end up behind the wall and therefore out of my reach, making this essentially a wasted slot. However, with the combined power of the Meteor, Bee, Ancient Cobalt and Crimson enchantments, I still managed to defeat the Wall of Flesh first try. With hard mode comes many new enchantments, and the first one is the most important in this entire playthrough, even more so than the Ancient Cobalt, Bee or Meteor enchantments. Thankfully, all I have to do to get it is find the wizard, buy a crystal ball, and then I'm ready to craft the wizard enchantment. On its own, this does absolutely nothing. It gives no stat bonuses, no damaging auras, no effects on hit and no new abilities, so you may be wondering what all the hype is about. Well, this enchantment has the very unique ability to empower every other enchantment in the game, with its effects depending on the enchantment placed directly below it. In the tooltip you can see all the empowered effects of my currently equipped enchantments, such as the Meteor enchantment increasing the damage, size and frequency of its meteors, the Ancient Cobalt enchantment granting increased invulnerability and explosion damage, or the Necro enchantment making bone piles larger, float in mid-air and home into the player. The most powerful, however, is the effect it has on the Bee enchantment, taking its flight from the level of fledgling wings all the way to bee wings, and increasing the damage of its bees from 16 to 66. The extra damage is nice, but what I'm really after is that sweet mobility, as there's not a single other enchantment in the game that acts as wings, making this combination incredibly valuable. Now while that may be the case, this combo alone won't get me very far, so I'm going to need some other options. Thankfully there's many new enchantments to choose from, but they all require various items that take quite a bit of time to collect, so instead of showing you the basic early hard mode progression we've all seen 1,000 times, why don't I condense it down to just the most important parts, the enchantments themselves. Fishing for hard mode crates gives me the ores and bars I need to craft the Cobalt enchantment, and upgrades to the already great Ancient Cobalt enchantment which increases the damage of the explosive jump and makes the players themselves explode when hit, damaging anything in its range. Slicing my way through a spider cave gives me the many fangs used to craft the spider enchantment, granting 10% crit chance and allowing my summons to crit for 1.5 times damage, which gets reduced to 1.25 times damage if holding a weapon from another class. Placing some graves around the arms dealer allows me to buy the quad barrel shotgun needed for the Adamantite enchantment, increasing attack speed the longer you fire a weapon at the cost of inaccuracy. Sadly it's less effective with homing weapons, for all you quick thinking viewers out there looking for a workaround. Fighting Crimson Mimics gives me the life drain, which then gets used to craft the Palladium enchantment. Put simply, this provides the rapid healing from Palladium armour, along with spawning a damaging orb every time I regenerate 80 health. While it's not an enchantment, I also craft the Ancient Master's map of the Lost King's great ancestors, revealing the entire world when used. Taking down some ice mimics for the Flower of Frost allows me to craft the Orichalcum enchantment, giving the petals from its set bonus and inflicting anything they hit with Orichalcum poisoning, which increases the damage of all debuffs by 2.5 times. Defeating a Hallowed Mimic gives me the Crystal Vial Shard needed for the Titanium enchantment, which, as you've probably already guessed, gives the Titanium shards from the armor set bonus. When you have the full 20 shards, you'll also gain resistance to most debuffs and 10 to 30% damage reduction for your next hit, scaling with how close you are to the enemy. Farming an unreasonable amount of Desert Spirits finally gives me the lamp I need to make the Forbidden enchantment, allowing me to place down a damaging storm at my cursor. Any projectile shot through the storm will deal 20% extra damage, and flying through the storm will recover flight time. Chopping some trees and catching some fleas in the Hallowed allows me to make the Pearlwood enchantment. With this, collecting any combat pickup like hearts or mana will fire a star at a nearby enemy and empower you for the next 5 seconds. While empowered, your critical strikes will be re-rolled favourably, meaning any attack that wasn't a crit will have another chance to be one. It essentially follows this formula here, with the regular crit chance in red and the Pearlwood crit chance in green, peaking at a 25% effective crit boost when you have a base crit chance of 50%, which is honestly really powerful. It also spawns a mana star every 6 seconds when attacking, making it quite easy to maintain the boost. Taking down Goblin Summoners and shimmering some Shadow Armor gives me everything I need for the Ancient Shadow enchantment. This acts as an upgrade to the Shadow enchantment by adding a third orb around the player and making their attacks inflict darkened, causing mobs to fire Shadow Flame tentacles at other enemies. Melting some Ice Golems grants me the Frost Cores needed for the Frost enchantment, and upgrades to the Snow enchantment from pre-hard mode. Instead of snowballs, the player will instead summon icicles around them that get launched upon attack. The player can also press a key to half the speed of all enemies and projectiles for 20 seconds with a 60-second cooldown. Finally, I use cosmic power beyond my understanding to manipulate the laws of time itself in order to buy a slightly rare gun from a flaky salesman used in the recipe of the Mithril enchantment. With this, not attacking increases the player's attack speed by up to 50% over 5 seconds, which can then be used for the next 3 seconds of attacking. It has some niche uses and a few synergies with other accessories, but more generally, it's just a nerf to your damage output. Somewhat surprisingly, I managed to collect all of those enchantments in just one 3.5 hour play session. So the next time I logged on, I was ready to get into some hard mode bosses, starting with the Queen Slime. After a couple failed attempts, I finally managed to take her down, unlocking a new enchantment themed after the Crystal Assassin set. I end up getting 4 sets of the shirt and pants in a row before I eventually get the hood. Then all I need to do is grind through a bunch of unicorns in the Hallowed for a unicorn on a stick, and I'm ready to craft the Crystal Assassin enchantment. This grants a powerful dash that can be angled diagonally. If you jump while dashing into the ground, you will also get a speed boost, and using the Rod of Discord will grant the first strike buff, increasing the damage and armor penetration of your next attack. Overall, it's a really good option, and if I wasn't currently using the Crystal Assassin armor, I'd probably be using the enchantment. Next on the boss list is the Banished Baron, and similar to the Cursed Coffin, this is my first time fighting it. It's obvious that this boss is heavily inspired by Duke Fishron, and it has some really fun attacks to dodge, but other than some weapons and the joy of fighting it, I don't get much out of it. That means it's mech time, and I chose Skeletron Prime as my primary target. I really enjoy this fight in Eternity mode, so much so that I definitely intentionally threw it right at the end so I could continue the fight for even longer. Some bad positioning causes me to lose the second fight too, so I was extra careful going into the third. Defeating Skeletron Prime allows me to make a few new weapons with the hallowed bars he drops, but the main upgrades at this point come from the old one's army, so I buy some monk armor and a lightning oricane from the Tavern Keep and get right into it. Just like with Tier 1, the event was no problem. I even took out 3 ogres, granting me enough defender medals to buy a full set of both apprentice and huntress armour. I'm not buying these to actually wear them, of course, and I think we're far enough into the video for you to know exactly what comes next. The huntress enchantment causes attacks to ignore 6 defense and deal an extra 3 flat damage. Every time you hit a shot, this will increase by the same amount again, but missing a shot will reset the bonus. This stacks up to 10 times for a total of 60 armour penetration and 30 extra damage. However, before you try to game the system, I should let you know that the bonus doesn't increase by either homing or minion attacks. The apprentice enchantment makes the next weapon in your hotbar attack with 1/7 of the attack speed, which can be really helpful for applying debuffs to enemies or getting summon tag bonuses without having to swap weapons. It also buffs Flame Burst Sentry's range and field of view, just like the armour set. After this, I still have enough defender medals for another set, so I also craft the Squire enchantment. While mounted, this gives a 25% boost to acceleration, movement speed and jump height, along with fall damage immunity, 10 defense, and the Fart in a Jar double jump. Aside from all the bonuses to mounts, it also makes healing sources 10% more effective and grants the Ballista Panic buff when hit. Honestly, I probably should have been using this a lot more than I did, as it's a really good mobility option. To complete the Old One's army set, I take off my armour and craft the Monk enchantment, granting a dash with a longer cooldown that briefly makes me immune to both damage and debuffs, along with dealing melee damage to any enemies I dash through. It also makes lightning aura sentries strike faster and deal crits. Overall, the Old One's army enchantments are some of the most unique and interesting in the game, opening up many opportunities for synergies depending on the weapons, mounts and accessories you use them with. For example, pairing the Apprentice enchantment with the Firecracker in Durandal allows me to get the explosions from the Firecracker and the whip speed bonus from the Durandal. Add to this the whip range and shockwave damage from the Tungsten enchantment, and it quickly destroys the Destroyer. Similarly, the Huntress enchantment pairs very well with the Mega Shark thanks to its fast fire rate, allowing you to quickly stack the bonuses even if you miss many of your shots. Even without the additional stacks, each bullet will still deal an extra 6 damage from the base bonus, which I believe also applies to the crystal bullet shards, making them highly effective at taking down the twins, especially in the Death Laser phase when it's much easier to hit shots. Now that all the mechs are down, I craft a pickaxe axe and get straight to mining chlorophyte in the jungle. I'm going to be needing a lot of this to craft everything I want, so I don't hold back. The mining trip also nets me quite a few life fruits, so I turn one of them into an Aegis fruit for the extra defense and eat the rest. Then it's time to once again get crafting. First up is the chlorophyte enchantment, an upgrade to the jungle enchantment that summons a ring of crystals to shoot at enemies, spawns damaging spores while flying, and grants a short distance dash. After another couple fights with the twins, I craft the Ancient Hallowed enchantment. This summons a Terra Prisma minion that follows the player's cursor. Right-clicking will cause the sword to slash, reflecting any projectiles with a 15-second cooldown. Next up is the regular Old Hallowed enchantment, which causes health potions to restore 40% extra health, but makes them take effect over time. Using a health potion will also create a shockwave that repels enemy projectiles, making this a really good enchantment to pair with the Charm of Myths, provided you're not doing a challenge where that would be illegal, of course. Lastly for this stage is the Turtle enchantment, an upgrade to the Cactus enchantment that inherits all of its effects along with reflecting 100% of contact damage. Its main effect, however, is allowing the player to enter a shell when grounded, not moving and not attacking. While in their shell, the player will have 90% damage resistance, will destroy incoming projectiles, and will deal 10 times Thorns damage. The shell lasts for 1 second or 20 blocked attacks, whichever one is longer. While these are all pretty interesting, I don't end up using any of them against the next boss. Instead, I opted to use a mix of early hard mode and even some free hard mode enchantments, which just goes to show how powerful these things can be. In fact, one of these is from as far back as the pre-boss stage. Despite that, the Tungsten enchantment's increased melee size still proves incredibly helpful in allowing me to keep some distance from the boss. Facilitated by the Empowered Bee enchantment's flight, the Meteor enchantment's speed, and the Cobalt enchantment's explosive jump, all while the Orichalcum enchantment's petals deal extra damage. Honestly, this loadout makes the fight feel only slightly more difficult than it would in a regular playthrough, and despite a couple of deaths before the successful attempt, Plantera was still a whole lot of fun to fight against with enchantments only. More important than my enjoyment, however, is the fact that she unlocks access to 4 new enchantments, and the first one is already very easily available by buying some Tiki armor from the Witch Doctor. This then gets crafted into the Tiki enchantment, which grants 20% extra whip range, makes whips scale with your highest class damage boosts, and allows you to whip your minions and projectiles to make them deal 20% extra damage. Definitely one to keep an eye on for all you summoner mains out there. Personally though, I'm going to stick with melee for now, relying on its high defense as I fight my way through the dungeon looking for some specific items. My main targets are the Spectre Staff and the Tactical Shotgun, both of which are used in enchantments. I'll also be needing quite a lot of ectoplasm, but that just comes naturally as a side effect of being in the dungeon. The ectoplasm then gets used to craft a set of Spectre armor and combined with the Spectre Staff to make the Spectre enchantment. This is a direct upgrade to the Fossil enchantment that causes spirits to be released when hit. Collecting a spirit will heal 20 HP and send it flying towards the nearest enemy. On top of this, dying will spawn several spirits and revive you as a ghost with 100 HP. In ghost form you can't attack, are immune to all damage, and have infinite flight for 5 seconds, after which the revive will go on cooldown for 5 minutes. I do end up using this a little later in the playthrough, but for now it's back to the jungle to farm the Uzi I need for the Shroomite enchantment. After 50 Angry Trappers I still don't have one, which is once again where Fargo's banner recipes come in clutch, allowing me to directly craft the Uzi which I can then use to make the Shroomite enchantment. I may not have realised it at the time, but this is actually one of the best enchantments in the run. When equipped, eating a mushroom will heal 50 HP and grant 20% damage and crit chance for the next 20 seconds. It also makes piercing projectiles spawn a damaging mushroom cloud on their first hit. Originally I discarded this because I thought the 30 seconds of potion sickness would make my damage too inconsistent, but when I eventually do use it, this seems to tick down much faster for whatever reason. I'm not too sure what's going on there, but what I am sure of is that this pumpkin moon is kicking my ass, and thanks to a change made by Fargo's, the mini-bosses will only drop items on the 15th wave, so I end the event with only a bat scepter and some spooky wood to show for it. To make up for this, at least Fargo's allows you to turn trophies into drops, and thanks to the iron enchantment passively giving me a chance to not consume materials, I end up with both the Raven Staff and the Horseman's Blade from a single trophy. On top of this, Fargo's also lets you buy spooky wood from the Lumberjack after beating the Pumpkin Moon, allowing me to make a full set of spooky armour and therefore the spooky enchantment. This is potentially the quickest and easiest to explain enchantment in the whole run. It simply gives your minions a new scythe attack. That's it. If you think I'm getting a little too comfortable with my current set of enchantments and not giving these new ones a fair try, then don't worry, as the next one I collect is going to fundamentally change my entire loadout. Before that though, we have a few loose ends to tie up, starting with the Lifelight. This boss is intended to be fought right before Plantera. I forgot it at the time, so I'm fighting it a little off tier, but that doesn't stop it from absolutely destroying me 3 times in a row. After switching back to a melee loadout with the Terrorblade, I just barely managed to take it down. And like with the other Fargo's bosses I've fought so far, it was a pretty fun fight but doesn't unlock much. Next I take on the Pumpkin Moon once again to get some more of its drops. The main one I'm after is the Witch's Broom, which will pair very nicely with the next enchantment that I'm clearly trying to build suspense for. To prepare for it, I also take down the Old One's army another couple times to rebuild my supply of Defender medals, then I make my way through the Jungle Temple, use a Lizard Instactuation Bomb to make some space, and then it's finally time to face off against Golem. After an unsuccessful first attempt, I nervously started the second. Then, just a third of the way into the fight, I lose around half my health from 2 hits in quick succession, and from there, it only gets worse. Another hit takes me down to less than 50 health, with half the fight still remaining. Then the next brings me down to just single digits. At this point, it seems the attempt is over, with my health struggling to regenerate against the Golem's constant attacks. Then I look down and see his own health. If I can just avoid getting hit for the next few seconds, then I may be able to salvage this. That was potentially the best version of Golem I've ever fought. What is usually an afterthought in most vanilla and Calamity playthroughs has become one of the highlights of this run, and the Fargo's devs require some serious recognition for that. Golem drops beetle husks, which I use to craft the offensive beetle set, then I buy some Valhalla armour from the Tavern Keep. Once again though, this isn't for wearing. But before I can turn this into one of the best enchantments in the game, I first have to farm a few thousand enemies in the ice biome to find a Viking helmet. This then gets combined with the armour I bought to make the Valhalla enchantment, an upgrade to the Squire enchantment that takes mounts from a decent alternative to accessories to the absolute pinnacle of mobility. When mounted, it provides a 50% boost to acceleration, movement speed and jump height, double what the Squire enchantment provides. It also gives the fall damage immunity and double jump, along with increasing the defense boost to 15. But what really sets it apart is the fact that it gives all mounts a very powerful dash, fixing the main issue many people have with using mounts over wings. In addition to left and right, this dash can also be used in any of the 8 cardinal directions, depending on the keys being pressed. And as if that wasn't enough, it also boosts healing sources by 15% and grants Ballista Panic when hit. In combination with the Witch's Broom, it replaces every single one of my movement enchantments, leaving a clean slate for me to experiment with future accessories. First on that list is the Shinobi Infiltrator enchantment, an upgrade to the Monk enchantment that allows you to perform a teleport dash that grants brief immunity, along with being able to teleport through walls and greatly enhancing the effectiveness of lightning aura sentries. Since the Valhalla enchantment already provides me a dash when mounted, it's not too useful with this loadout. Next up is the Dark Artist enchantment, an upgrade to the Apprentice enchantment that makes the next weapon in your hotbar attack with 1/5 of the attack speed. It also summons a little Flame Burst minion to attack with you and greatly enhances any Flame Burst sentries you place. This one does earn a spot in my loadout, with it providing some decent survivability options when combined with the Vampire Knives. However, the best weapon I can think to use this with requires one more check-in with the Old One's army, which this time ends with an all-out battle against Betsy. I just barely managed to take her down first try, and sadly I don't get the weapon I was after, but thankfully she also drops an item I can use to spawn her, meaning I don't have to fight through the entire Old One's army just to get to her. This next attempt gives me exactly what I wanted, Betsy's Wrath. This thing has one of the most powerful debuffs in the game, being able to reduce enemy defense by a whopping 40. In conjunction with the Dark Artist enchantment, I'm able to easily keep enemies inflicted with this, which helps me take down Golem once again for the extra beetle husks I need for the beetle enchantment. Like the beetle armour, this will spawn beetles that each grant 10% melee damage and melee speed. When you get hit, these will instead provide 15% damage reduction for the next 10 seconds. Unlike the armour however, these buffs are capped at level 2, for a maximum 20% offensive boost or a 30% damage reduction boost. Finally, after taking down Betsy a few more times for the Aerial Bane, I use it to craft the Red Riding enchantment. This upgrades the Huntress enchantment's armour penetration to 10 and extra damage to 5, stacking all the way up to 100 armour penetration and 50 extra damage. Once reaching the full 10 stacks, arrows will also rain down on enemies based on what's in the player's ammo slots. This was the final enchantment available before Moonlord, leaving the route forward wide open for one final boss rush. With the Ancient Manipulator dropped by the Cultist, I'm able to make the second armour added by the Fargo Souls mod, the Gaia set. This provides excellent stat boosts for every class, along with allowing me to enter offensive mode, massively increasing my damage output at the cost of survivability. With it, I'm able to take down the 4 pillars and make my final preparations for the Moonlord. Fargo's turns the pillars into a kind of event/mini-boss, where after taking out enough enemies to drop the shields, the pillar itself will attack you. If you end up dying, it will also regenerate its health rather quickly, meaning you really have to take it out in one go. Each pillar is weak to the class it represents, with the viability of every other class being heavily nerfed. So for the Stardust pillar you want to use Summoner, for Nebula you want to use Mage, and so on. Thankfully I already have some decent weapons for each class from the likes of Betsy and Duke Fishron, but crafting more options from the pillar fragments will certainly help against the Moonlord himself. Overall, these aren't too difficult, but just like in vanilla, the solar one is definitely the worst, with me dying quite a few times before it falls. The Moonlord takes the class-specific damage from the pillars and adds a timer, so every 30 seconds his damage weakness will change between the 4 classes, with a 5th phase where all classes are viable. Because of this, I don't want to lean too heavily into any individual class, so my loadout currently consists of the Empowered Shroomite enchantment to buff my damage and crit chance, the Valhalla enchantment providing excellent movement when combined with the Witch's Broom, the Pearlwood enchantment making my crits reroll, the Beetle enchantment mainly for the damage reduction, and finally the Spider enchantment to allow my minions to perform crits. Between deaths I experiment with a few other enchantments such as the Palladium and Spectre for increased survivability, Molten or Necro for higher damage, and even swapping out the Shroomite for the Hallowed enchantment to buff potions rather than mushrooms. But in the end I worked my way back to the original loadout for the final, successful attempt. With that, I've managed to beat every single boss in vanilla Terraria while using only enchantments for accessories. But the run doesn't end there. By combining almost every crafting station in the game with the Luminite dropped by Moonlord, I can craft the Crucible of the Cosmos, an endgame crafting station added by Fargo's that allows me to craft forces. These things act as enchantments on steroids, combining the effects of many of them into a single accessory. I can currently craft 8 of them, which is a good time to bring up a pretty major mistake I made after defeating the Cultist. Turns out he dropped a consumable that grants an extra accessory slot, but it went straight into my void bag and I never noticed until after I defeated Moonlord, meaning I managed to beat him with one less accessory than I should have. This leaves just one force that can't be equipped, but I honestly don't mind that, as I'm still exponentially more powerful than I was just a single boss ago, and it turns out Fargo's wants to test that power against some familiar faces, as to get the next tier of weapons I need to take down buffed versions of each pre-hard mode boss. These all have increased health, speed, damage and defense, but annoyingly still suffer from the same AI quirks that the usual bosses do. Even when they don't despawn halfway through the fight, they're still quite hard to take down, with each hit dealing massive damage to the player. Regardless, I managed to defeat the Eye of Cthulhu, Eater of Worlds, Brain of Cthulhu and Skeletron on the first try, with them each dropping a material to upgrade a previous weapon from the run to the post-Moonlord level. Combined with the forces, these weapons make refighting the Moonlord so much easier, which then grants more Luminite for more weapons and more importantly, more enchantments. First is the Solar enchantment, which builds charge when attacking that increases damage reduction by up to 20%. Once fully charged, you can stop attacking to release a damaging Solar Blast. After another Moonlord fight, I craft the Vortex enchantment, making attacks against distant enemies fire a piercing laser that deals range damage. Next up is the Nebula enchantment. Every 3 seconds, this will fire a Nebula shot that homes in on enemies, deals magic damage, and spawns a booster from the Nebula armor set. Unlike the armor, however, these are capped at level 2 and can't spawn mana boosters, but it's still a very powerful option. Finally, I craft the last enchantment in the run, the Stardust enchantment. This summons the Stardust Guardian from the armor set and allows you to freeze time for 6 seconds with a 90-second cooldown. While time is frozen, your minions are able to attack and you can still fire weapons, but any projectiles from them will be frozen in place until it ends. With the power of every single enchantment in the game currently available to me, it's time to take on the final few bosses that Fargo's has to offer, starting with Eridanus. This ended up being a really tough battle that took a lot of time to learn, and when I eventually did win it was because for some reason the boss wouldn't despawn after I died. I felt it would be a little unfair to take this though, so I continued until I got a legitimate one, which happened just a couple attempts later. With the Eridanium he dropped, I can craft the final force, the Force of the Cosmos, combining the effects of the Meteor, Wizard and Lunar Fragment enchantments. I also craft the Eridanus armor set, which once again has excellent all-round stats which can be further boosted by the Eridanus Blessing effect. When active, this empowers each class with extra damage, crit and attack speed, with the empowered class changing every 12.5 seconds. These are the only upgrades I can get before facing my next challenge and the penultimate boss of the playthrough, the Abomination. Just like Eridanus, this battle was one I had to spend many attempts learning. Then, when I finally understood each attack, the successful one felt like second nature. The Abomination drops my most sought after item in the entire run, the crafting material that allows me to combine all my forces into the Soul of Terraria, the culmination of every single enchantment I've collected and my final goal for this playthrough. I may as well use it against something though, right? With the Soul of Terraria obtained, I would now allow myself to use other accessories alongside it. I've cut out quite a large section here of me crafting these, but honestly it wasn't too bad. I had already collected most of the items throughout the playthrough, so it was mainly a matter of filling in some gaps and taking down the Abomination a few times for the abominable energy used to combine it all. I also took down all of the empowered hard mode bosses to make some weapon upgrades, but I figured I wouldn't waste your time showing all this because as far as I'm concerned, you came here to see me play with some enchantments and make the Soul of Terraria. So this bit is almost an after credit scene to show me completing the mod by fighting the mutant, which I must say was a whole lot of fun and very satisfying to beat. If you enjoyed the video and want to continue going deeper into each enchantment, then why don't you join me as I test and rank them all in this video here, which acts as a soft sequel / companion to the one you've just watched all the way to the end. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.